What is up, everybody? My name is Whooped. Mechabellum just released an update, patch 0.9.0.2. They have some balance changes, some of which I think are really good. Vulcan got nerfed, kind of.
Only a little bit. Enough. A good amount, not the most though.
Let's start with the Vulcan. So its health is going from about 40,000 down to 39,000, and its attack is going from 90 to 86, so its DPS is going from 900 to 860. So this is technically a nerf to Vulcan. I think they missed the mark a little bit. Now I'm happy that it's being nerfed, because I'd rather it be nerfed than not be nerfed. But the problem with Vulcan isn't necessarily its base attack, and in fact I think its health should actually be higher, not lower, but that's with other changes that I'd also like to make to it. Anyway, the problem with Vulcan is that it can do everything. I would like to see his range reduced significantly. If they just lowered his base range stat to, let's say, from 95 down to like 75, and they removed range enhancement, and then they made him a lot more tanky, I feel like he should clear Chef really, really well, but he shouldn't annihilate literally everything on the board under 200 range that's ground. And that's what he does right now. So anyway, I like the fact he's nerfed, but I wish more would be done to change Vulcan. Fortress had a buff nerf. Its shield barrier is going from 36,000 health to 40,000 health per level, but the cost is increasing from 400 to 500. Fortress Fang is kind of a large part of the meta right now, and I'm not entirely sure that increasing the cost from 400 to 500 is going to change that, especially since there's less of a trade-off because you're getting more HP. The melting point got a small buff. The cost of armor enhancement is decreasing from 200 to 100. Armor enhancement on the melting point gives you 50% HP and gives you damage mitigation, 60 per level. And this is pretty crazy value for 100 supplies, but the problem is that's not really how melting point's played. You know, you never want units getting to the melting point. It's not going to be your tank. There are other techs that you're going to want instead of that. That's not really how you play the melting point, right? You're absolutely going to want range, energy absorption, and EMP barrage way before you'd want armor enhancement. And you could even make a case for crawler production and diffraction. Yeah, I just don't think armor enhancement's going to be teched unless it's their fourth, and that's if they want it over energy diffraction and crawler production anyway. The steel ball got nerfed a tiny bit. The cost of energy absorption is going from 200 to 250. So I think this change is fantastic. This is actually the best change of the patch, I think. Energy absorption on the steel ball is very strong. I wouldn't say it's OP, but I think 250 is much more aligned with where energy absorption should be. And so I think it's a good change going from 200 to 250. Again, I don't see it changing much, but I think this is an adjustment that makes it more accurate, and that's exactly what we're aiming for. I think it's where it should be. The crawler got a nerf. The cost of loose formation went from 250 to 400. This has some people upset and some people thinking it was a needed change. I'm a little conflicted on loose formation, to be honest, because 400 seems like a bit much in a meta that's dominated by Vulcan and Incendiary Bomb and Storms and Incendiary Bomb and Vulcan. But yeah, I mean, going from 250 to 400 seems like a pretty big jump to me. Maybe I would like to see it, 350 or 300 first. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a powerful technology. You remove Vulcan from the situation, it can absolutely dominate a game. And so if you have a tech that can dominate a game, then it makes sense that it's a little bit more expensive. Personally, I'm not really upset about it, but I do think it's a little high. The Overlord got a little bit of a buff. Its attack reduction is decreasing from 40% to 30%. So when you click high explosive ammo, your damage output decreases by 30% now, and it used to decrease by 40%. But now I think 30% is closer to where it should be and closer to other high explosive ammos. And I think it is a viable tech to use on your Overlord. I think it actually could be a pretty good tech, and it's only 200, so it's pretty cheap. I like it. This is the one I'm actually most excited for. The Arclight's attack decreased from 391 to 347, which is an 11% decrease. That I don't particularly like, but the attack interval also decreased from 1.1 seconds to 0.09 seconds, meaning it attacks a lot faster, which I am very excited for. The attack interval on the Arclight used to, attack once every 1.1 seconds. Now it attacks once every 0.9 seconds. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually makes a pretty big difference, and I like it. It feels a lot better to me, and charge shot also feels better to me. Some people think the Arclight is still useless because charge shot still sucks. For a lot of people, it's not going to make much of a difference. Charge shot probably needs to see a buff, but I'll take what I can get right now. The Phoenix got a small buff. The cost of quantum reassembly decreased from 200 to 150. Quantum reassembly is a really, really cool tech. So when a Phoenix dies, it's going to come back to life 15 seconds later, at the next closest Phoenix. I think that is a super cool tech. Is it viable in 1v1s? Competitively, Not so much. Personally, I don't think this is going to change much. Quantum reassembly is not a 1v1 tech. It's mostly used in 2v2s and free-for-alls, so for those modes it might change something. For 1v1s, it's not much of a buff because most people don't use quantum reassembly. I've personally used it one single time, and it actually won me the game. The War Factory got majorly buffed. The attack increased from 6,843 to 7,184, which is a 5% increase. The efficient maintenance upkeep reduction was adjusted from 100 to 150, and the cost of armor enhancement is going from 200 to 100, more in line with the melter. I'm not a War Factory player, so I'm not entirely sure how much of an impact that will have, but I do know that the War Factory change did make, some people upset. I think in 1v1s you'll see earlier War Factories and you'll see more of them, and probably 2v2s as well. And then in free-for-all, you're absolutely going to see more War Factories. So that is a little bit scary because it's getting, buffs across the board. There could be a bit of a War Factory meta that starts to emerge. The Sandworm got a little bit of a buff. They also got a buff nerf situation. The cost of Sandstorm decreased from 400 to 300, but the effective time decreased from 10 seconds to 5 seconds. And the cost of Sudden Strike on the Sandworm is decreasing from 300 to 200. Sandstorm is the most popular technology on the Sandworm. It's definitely the one I see used the most, and people think it is the best, generally speaking. I personally don't like it because it affects me and them. And lowering the effective time from 10 seconds to 5 seconds, I think that's a fantastic change. To me, this seems much more aligned with how it should be. I think they have this one nicely balanced. Now, of course, we'll have to see how it plays out. For me, Sudden Strike on paper seems like a pretty good tech, and it feels pretty nice to use, but I don't think it really is that efficient. For 300 costs, it's hard to justify using it. However, I think lowering it down to 200 is closer to where that should be, and it might be a viable tech to use now, especially since Sandstorm, its efficiency also got lowered down to 5 seconds. So if you weren't aware, you get plus or minus HP based on your starting specialist, but also your starting unit composition. That's why the HPs, that's why the health pools are different for each player. And there's been a lot of changes to HP, a lot of reductions, actually. There are two that stand out to me the most. The first is cost control. Its attack and HP nerf is going from 13% to 11%. Some people like it, and I wanted to like it, but cost control just felt really bad to use, honestly. But now, maybe bringing it down to 11% from 13 will help a little bit. That being said, its HP pool also decreased from 400 to plus 200. I just don't think cost control is that great. But I know some people like it, so it is what it is, but I personally am not going to use it. I do think it's a positive change, though, lowering it from 13 to 11. And then the one that I think is the biggest impact is Sabertooth. Its HP bonus decreased from plus 300 to minus 200. Sabertooth is a really strong play right now, Sabertooth Specialist, and so lowering its HP makes sense to me. And it lowered it by 500, which is pretty significant. I mean, think about how many games have you played where you've won with under 500 HP. You know what I mean? There's some other changes in here. There's a lot of reductions, actually. So very interesting. There are only two things on this list that actually got HP added, and that's Aerial Specialist, which is going from an HP bonus of 0 to now plus 300. Overall, I think it's a pretty good patch. I think they did a good job with the Steel Ball. They did a good job with the Sandworm. I like the fact that Vulcan was nerfed, even though, it's not as much as I would like, or even in the direction I would like, but I do like the fact that Vulcan was nerfed. I'm interested to see the reaction to the loose formation on the crawler, and I'm interested to see if War Factory is going to turn into a bit of a meta. Overall, nothing too crazy outside the War Factory and maybe loose formation. Yeah, but we'll see how it shakes out. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Did they nerf loose formation a little bit too much? And did they buff the War Factory a little bit too much? If you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing. I'm Whooped. Thanks for watching.
This is Mechabellum, and it's going down. Whooped, got it poppin'.